I'm Lee Lewis. I'm the artistic director of Griffin Theatre Company in Sydney. I see the company really as being a company that works for all of the theatre companies in the country, in that we're a stage where we can create really intimate works, which are often a good starting point for new writers or very complex space for more established writers to work in. And we can start plays that no one else can start. It's our job in the ecosystem, the ecology of the country, playwriting-wise, to take plays on that other companies couldn't take a chance on. When everybody talks about, oh, risk, that's the place we work in. And when they talk about innovation, that's the place we've got to be working in. So yes, we spend a lot of our time talking to audience about encouraging those qualities in themselves that are excited by risk as opposed to afraid of it, and ultimately encouraging deep curiosity in audience and writers and directors and actors. For me, the role of the artistic director is to live the ideas of the company. Griffin, it's a lot about the art. I started out very early in theatre. I fell in love with the theatre when I was 3. It became a space where I was very comfortable straight away, and I don't know why. There was no theatre background in my family, but I remember vividly being backstage at a theatre when I was 3, knowing I was in the right place, and that feeling's never gone away. So from 3, at about 12, I sat my dad down and said, I'm not going to be a lawyer, I'm going to work in theatre all my life. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in theatre, but I just know I'm going to be in the theatre all my life. I'll probably start as an actor, and I laid down a plan for myself, which said essentially, if you haven't figured it out by the time you're 35, you should get out and do another job, which seemed to be fair, actually. That was pretty smart for a 12-year-old. So I started off as an actor. I moved myself over to America to train over there, and I did a master's in acting over there and got to work with some extraordinary directors, and they were really the people that set me on the path to directing. And I went to NIDA and did the director's course there, and then did a master's there in directing so that I could work with Aubrey Mellor, who is a god among men, and then kept going. I think I just didn't stop, and it went from job to job to job, and then I started working as an associate here. Nick Marchant approached me and said, would you like to work inside the framework of a company a couple of days a week? I'm like, oh, would I? Which gave me a little bit of security while I was still freelancing around the country. And then when Sam decided to leave and go down to Melbourne Theatre Company, I thought, you know what, I would really like to head up this company. 2 big turning points for me. One was when I took myself overseas to audition for different drama schools, and I knew that I wanted to go overseas because I wanted a wider vision than what was in Australia at the time. And I remember a friend up the street, his sister was a casting director or agent in London, and he said, oh, you should go meet her. And I was sort of too scared, so I dropped off my headshot, and she called me. She said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm auditioning for schools. And she said, oh, that's good. She said, you know what, it doesn't matter where you go, it just matters that you go. I went, what do you mean? She said, you just need to give yourself time as an artist to think about how to be an artist and to work without the pressure of having to deliver work. And I appreciated that, so I ended up going to a great school, but I loved that thought that it doesn't matter where you go, it just matters that you do go, that you commit to your idea of being an artist and that you take that to a professional level. Then down the track, I was very influenced by a beautiful composer. I was working on a show that he was composing, and he said to me that when he was young, he was a brilliant trumpeter, Manhattan School of Music. And he said that someone had said to him very early on, you could go on and be a great trumpeter, but you will always be a trumpeter in someone else's orchestra. You have the capacity to compose. You therefore have the responsibility to see if you can. And he was telling that to me as a young director. I was a very good actor, but he was essentially saying, you will always be a very good actor, but you'll end up acting in other people's work all your life. You have a capacity to direct, you need to pursue that, because not many people can. And I was, all into acting at that point, and so directing was a curiosity to me, but I carried that with me, just that thought of I didn't necessarily want to always be so dependent on someone else's vision. when I was capable of having vision myself in a work. So those two pieces, I think, of information have just stayed with me. Look, when I came back from New York, John Howard was in government, and I came back to a theatre community that was very, had a lot of its passion quite suppressed. People were very good at jumping through hoops and not rocking the boat, because it felt like a lot of, that you could lose what you had if you spoke up too loudly. And I was surprised that wasn't the Australia that I'd left. And I missed that very vocal group of artists that I'd left. I've been very interested to see that voice coming back, and with people people gaining their artists gaining their political voices again. That's what I've started to see. Or maybe it's a new generation of artists coming up going, well, this is ridiculous, we have to change this. And then older artists going, I thought we had, because I remember protesting myself. So it feels like people are addressing like the missing years of activism in theatre and what theatre can actually do. So I can feel that coming back in great ways. And I think communications have changed enormously in the last 10 years. And so I see an artistic community that's much more comfortable in having global conversations. Writers are moving around the world, working with companies on the other side of the planet, because those companies have found their work because they can find representations of their work online much more easily. So that old feeling that if you're an artist you have to leave Australia to have success has gone away. You leave, of course, but you come back. And I think there's whereas in the 1980s I think there was a lack of knowledge as to how to have an international conversation. Now there's absolutely a knowledge that Australia can lead that conversation. And finally I'm feeling that distance is no longer an impediment. Distance isn't an impediment. It's actually a great advantage in giving you perspective over global politics. And I think that's what we're starting to see in our writers. And that's across our journalists, our novelists, our playwrights. I'm talking about the writing community really starting to have a voice in the world where we're valuing the perspective that just that bit of distance gives us. We can speak to the European community, the American community, and the Asian communities in a very different way to writers that have grown up in those centres, whether they're English, whether they're American. Being in the centre of at the centre of the world doesn't necessarily give you great perspective on the world. So I'm seeing a really big shift in that. I'm seeing greater comfort in looking at how where our arts are not very representative of the population that we now have. We've got people from 200 different national backgrounds living in Australia, living in Sydney, and I can see the theatre community wrestling with the fact that our work on stage is not representing that amazing diversity. But a few years ago, no one was comfortable talking about that, and no one was comfortable being proactive about that, and now people are. And I think we're starting to have real gains, not nearly fast enough for the ambition of those diverse voices, but we are actually starting to make real and lasting gains. So I think we're in a great new age of the growth of real diversity on our stages, which is slow to build but lasting in its shift. I think those are the main ones.